have Ron Reed, and I'll be asking you a few questions if you're okay with that.
That'd be beautiful.
Okay. How do you feel about the land that we are getting taken away from us?
The land that's being taken away from us, I think it has already been taken from us, and we're trying to get land back. That's my perspective. That when the federal government come in and took our land, a lot of things weren't known about management of the resources here in our region. And over time, because of climate change, because of fire suppression, because of fossil fuel, people have to readdress the quality of life. And right now, indigenous science is leading the way in that area. The only way we can really positively be vocal leaders in this process is to get our land back. And it's a land that's being mismanaged, and it's causing all these environmental problems. Dam removal is happening to save the salmon. Prescribed fire is happening to save the salmon. Our ceremonies are happening to save the salmon. And we have political endeavors designed to protect the salmon. Only way we can contribute in the modern management paradigm is to be able to manage our land. And the only way we can manage our land is to identify not only the landscape, but the resources that contribute to the Kaduk lifestyle.
How do you feel about the salmon in total were with the dams built?
I feel like the salmon. I feel oppressed. I feel suppressed. I feel like none's being managed for me as an indigenous person. The quality of life that I need is addressed through our ceremonies, our way of life, our cultural integrity. In order to be able to do that, we have to have land, we have to have ceremonies, and we have to have this perspective that provides life over time. That's what the world renewal ceremonies provide, and that is what we need to be successful in this world today.
Okay.
If I didn't answer your question, go ahead, come back and ask me.
No,
again.
that was good. For the final question, how do you feel about the rivers within our land?
The river is the lifeblood of our people, of our lifestyle, of our ceremonies, of all the relationships that we develop on earth is connected to this river. The salmon is connected to that river. The salmon, fire, all the elements in the world are connected to our ceremonies, connected to that salmon. I'm a traditional dip net fisherman and a ceremonial leader at INAM, World Renewal. What I believe in is putting fire on the landscape for the salmon, for the people, to create life over time. That's an inherent responsibility by all Kaduk people. Each person has an inherent responsibility as a Kaduk person, and it progresses your involvement with the ceremonies and the cultural integrity that provides the Kaduk lifestyle.
Well, thank you today for this interview.
You're welcome, and I think that thank you for doing the work that you do, because it's your voice is what I'm trying to magnify. I'm trying to provide a resource, a way of life, cultural integrity into a lifestyle that will provide you the ability to move on and flourish in this world today. Yo, Tor.
Thank you. So what has Ron Reed said? I feel like what he's saying is true. Our land has been taken away from us, and only then are we actually getting it back slowly by slowly. So even these days, even trying to gather the stuff we want, we are not able to go through our land properly. Feels like, in a way, we are trespassing in what was our literal land. Like saying, I broke into my own house, even though it is the ownership of what we have. And it's not like we say it is. For me, it feels like it's something we must stand for in a way. For what I have shown my own way, we all have our own mindset and decisions in our own rights. We have been doing a lot right now, and we're doing our best we can. And I'm hoping to also stand up for what we have gone for. Even in the way of the salmon, with it being in deep trouble, I'm hoping I can do at least something to help stand the walls to what we have been protecting for our sacred lives. I wouldn't say sacred, but in a way like that. Thank you, Ivan. Now we have Kathy for the next one. Enjoy. We have Kathy here for this interview. So I'll be asking you a few questions. Thank you for sparing some time.
You're welcome.
So how do you feel about the lands being taken away from us, in a way?
Well, it breaks my heart. My grandmother had an allotment across the river at the village of Ishipishi, and that allotment was sold by the BIA, which severed our family's relationship to that village site and that spot where she was born. So the land taken away, it tried to make me feel like a visitor to my land where my families have been for thousands of years. I'm not a stranger. I know this land better than a lot of people. I know what plants to use. I know where to go to get the plants. I know what time of year to hunt, to fish. So I have a knowledge of the land that a lot of people don't have. And I learned that from my grandparents.
Mm.
And having not being able to be involved in land management and not being able to use prescribed fire, it's been detrimental to my culture, my community, because a lot of the plants we use come along the river corridor and they grow in the oak woodlands and grasslands. But since the land was taken away from us by the U.S. Forest Service, who denied us allotments, there's paperwork in the Six Rivers National Forest and the Klamath National Forest Supervisor's Office where the ranger denied that native person, that Crook person, the ability to have an allotment on the land they were born in, on the land their grandparents were born in. So this land was taken away and they tried to turn it into a tree farm. Yeah, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that we can't fish and hunt, or that we have to be involved in a lottery to draw a tag to go hunt elk for our family. People complain, and there's this real push on about, government interfering in people's lives and that people want to be independent. But what happened to us is that we were kicked off our land. We were made to be dependent on the government. And every time that in the past that we tried to be involved in management, we were told no, that this is government land. Well, that's been like the king's land that Europeans were trying to run away from in England. They brought that whole system here. And they put themselves above the native people and pretended that we didn't know what we were talking about, that we didn't know about the land, that they knew everything. And that's only been 150 years that people have come in with that attitude, especially government people. And we've been here for thousands of years. So our traditional ecological knowledge is important. And I learned mine from my grandparents. Every month there was something we would go out and gather. We would gather the hazelnuts. We would go out and gather the black caps that grew up in the openings. We would go and hunt hazel bushes and look for hazelnuts up on the ridges. I would go pick basket material with my grandmother. We would sit up at the falls. There used to be, before they put the new road in, there used to be a little bench up above the falls, up by where the old restaurant was. You know, that turnout that everybody kind of goes up and looks down?
Yeah.
A long time ago, there used to be a white oak there, and there was a wood bench around that white oak. You know, I was about 6 years old. That would be the early 60s. I can remember my grandmother and I sitting up there watching my grandfather dip for salmon down at Ishipishi Falls with the other men. And so that was part of our life, was always going out and getting something, being out in the woods. That's why I know so much about the plants and the animals and the trees, because I'm always out there. So the land means everything to me. It's my home. As has been said before, it's my home, it's my church, it's where I get my water, it's where I recreate, it's where my spiritual. In a native religion, you don't need to go to church and be in a house and have a preacher tell you things, because native religion is based on ceremony, is based on manipulating the vegetation, and they're keys to us that ecological things have to happen, or we need to make them happen, or it's time for them to happen. When you look at our religion, don't compare it to another religion, because it is very different.
Thank you.
hmm
How do you feel about the salmon and the dams that have been built across their paths?
My uncle Casey told me that when they wanted to build the dams when he was younger, a lot of the people that came through to kind of talk to the local communities about it, and Department of Fish and Game and other people said that if we ever needed the water, they would always let the water out for the lower part of the river. And when we needed the water, that never happened. And what happened up in the basin was that they tried to turn it. It had a function. It was a great big wet area for the birds and the wildlife, and it was part of the ecosystem. But with the concept of industrialization, and that we needed to produce food to feed the masses who are actually working and consuming, there's the consumers. And so they drained the wetland. And people didn't realize, they thought they could take an action and do it and have it be in a vacuum and not cause consequences in another system or with the systems. They've learned that since they drained the water out of there, and if they stopped the water from coming further downriver, that they've caused ecosystems to collapse. So building dams and draining estuaries for progress is actually taking us backwards. It's been a detriment. So I'm glad the dams are coming out. I look forward to it. The dams, they outlived their purpose. Even when they were built, they wrote that in there, that dams should be reviewed every 50 years. So they knew that it really wasn't a good thing, and dams get old. So you look at, they had no choice but to take them out. It's just like the Eel River Dam. It's coming up for its 50-year licensing renewal. People that own the dams or run them realize that in the years 2000, 2022, that rebuilding a dam in its place is expensive, and it may be detrimental to the ecosystem. So those dams, people aren't fighting to keep those dams in; they're wanting them to be released. And hey, if you find out maybe that wasn't the thing to do, you can then build another dam. But I think that going around and damming up all of the rivers along the northwest coast, they were killing off our salmon. They were blocking them from getting up to the tributaries where they lay the eggs. So it contributed to the decline and collapse of the salmon. And I'm glad that it's coming out, and I wish it hadn't become such a political hot potato, because there was no way that the owner of the Climate Dams was going to keep them in. It wasn't feasible.
Thank you. I have one final question. How do you feel about the rivers in our land?
The river, my grandmother told my grandfather, my grandmother told my uncle. My grandmother lived in the village across the river, well, they actually lived at Amakiatum. But when old man Nelson in the 1800s cut the water off, people had to move out of Amakiatum. And they moved up, my family moved up. They had relatives here at the village of Ishipish, and that's where my grandmother was born. And she told my uncle, just like I'm standing here right now, she was standing over on the other side. She told me everything that we need is in front of us and behind us. That means the salmon in the river, the freshwater mussels, the sturgeon, the lamprey, all of those aquatic species. And then as you go up the mountain slope, Right behind the village was the tan oak stands and the mushrooms. You get up a little bit up on the hill slope, and then that's where they would gather the manzanita berries. And then you get a little bit further up, and you see on the ridges, that's where they get the sugar pine. And then as you back over the ridges and go into the flats back there, you get the chinkapin nuts and the deer, and more tan oak stands, and more uh, mushrooms and hazel and stuff there, and salal berries and huckleberries. Our land is a food forest. You can eat madrone berries too. Almost all of our plants are edible, but we've been trained not to eat them. When if you see a fire go through, and a prescribed fire, I really like prescribed fire. That's when the best of our plants come back up. All those flowers and those teas and the grasses. Well, we use fire to check the successional stage of an area and keep it in the oak woodland grassland. So the river means everything to me. We can get, all our needs are met. Our people used to live here without any support from the Europeans, and we still do that. We know how to do that, and that's what this camp is about, is teaching people, teaching our people about our environment again, bringing them back home.
Yo, toi.
Yeah.
And that'll be it for the interview.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, for what she has said. And now we have Crystal's turn on this interview and our last one. Key, Crystal.
Aiki, I would.
I'm going to be asking you some questions.
Sounds good.
What does the salmon mean to you?
Salmon are so that's our traditional word for salmon, and I love that word. Everybody knows it, which is good. But to me, when I think of I think of my uncles processing fish, and they're real gentle with the fish when they cut it into strips, and then they take little pieces of cotton twine and tie it to sticks, and they put it up in the smokehouse. And I have one uncle that likes to marinate it in like a special kind of sauce. And then I have another uncle that likes to marinate it in honey. And so he'll have this big rag and he'll dip it in the honey, and then he'll put it on the salmon. And any way you look at it, it takes hours and hours and hours to prepare the fish and to smoke the fish. And then my uncles really give a lot of fish away. So I feel like when I think of Amma, I think of taking care of your people, and I think of generosity, and I think of purposeful actions. So to me, fish means you live in a healthy society, and having fish means you have fish to give to people that don't have fish. And I hear the stories from my uncles too. They used to have a trigger net at Aubrey Creek, and they would have this trigger net that would catch fish at night. And then when the men would wake up, they'd get those fish and they'd take them up to the elders upriver. And so I feel like fish is love in a lot of ways, and also I really enjoy eating it and watching the little kids and the elders eating it, because they just get it all over with the little oils, and they just love it so much, and it makes me happy.
Okay. I'd say that is the most we have gotten out of most people, but yeah. How do you feel about the rivers when it comes to them?
I love the river, and I think it's sad that scientists say that elders and pregnant women and small children can't swim in the river anymore because it's so polluted now, and the water levels are so low, and there's so much algae bloom in it. I feel like it's a real loss for the community that all these bad things are associated with the river now, and the water could literally poison us. And I wish that that the dams would get removed so that the water could have a chance of getting flushed out and flushing its system out, and the spawning grounds could come back for the salmon. I wish that could happen in a good way, so that we have more fish, because more fish is more love.
What do you have? What do you have? Thank you, Yotwa, for this interview, and back to you, Ivan. Yotwa, which means thank you for listening to this. Means a lot. Save the salmon. They mean a lot to me and means a lot to others.